She died in her own bed, in the middle of the night, when no one was around. Blood slowly seeped out of her, soaking into the mattress, and pus oozed from a wound on her thigh that no one had had time to treat. When her body was found, it was warm, only in the lower abdomen. The body of the heiress was discovered only in the morning. She had used the bed alone. The queen, who had never married, observed strict discipline and rejected all suitors, lived in the southern part of the palace, in a wing where no one was allowed to enter without being summoned. She missed morning mass for the first time in 6 years. The servant who dared to enter later said, "I thought she was asleep, then I smelled something." According to the official version, she was suffering from a fever, but the court physician, Gaspard Delon, in a report sent to the Privy Council, stated, "The fever does not explain the discharge of pus, the swelling of the lower abdomen, and the putrid odor emanating from the genital tissues." This document was hidden in the archives, but a copy was preserved. At least 6 hours passed between her death and the arrival of the doctor. During this time, enough fluid was released from the body to ruin the bedding and soak the floorboards. A servant said, "When we moved the body, everything underneath was wet and smelled like a dead pig." Death probably occurred between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. The last hours were recorded in the letters of Margarita, the chambermaid. She asked for vinegar. I brought a flask. She put it to her forehead and said, "If it starts, don't be afraid." It started 20 minutes later. First, convulsions in her legs, then blood from her mouth, then she didn't open her eyes. The queen's virginity was a matter of state importance. That is why the body wasn't touched until the arrival of Bishop Valen. His signature was required to allow a doctor to examine the body. According to rumors, he arrived late because he had to prepare himself. When he was allowed to see the body, he stood silently for several minutes. One of the guards later reported, he wiped his eyes. Then he said, "The body is no longer hers. It belongs to no one now." The first signs of decomposition appeared the very next day. This caused alarm. Under normal conditions, in low winter temperatures, a woman's body can remain intact for up to 3 days. Here, by nightfall, the face had darkened, and a new pocket of pus had appeared between the legs. The court physician ordered an examination of the groin, but part of the skin had already begun to peel away. The autopsy report, compiled secretly during the night, noted, "The genital tissue is loose and bleeds when touched. Inside, there is swelling and signs of internal bleeding. The inguinal lymph nodes have swollen to the size of plums. Upon autopsy, thick gray-green pus was found." These descriptions never made it into the official chronicles. Officially, the cause of death was acute winter fever. Rumors, however, did not stop. By the morning of the 3rd day, people were saying in the markets that her debauchery killed her. The clerk of the Holy Trinity Monastery wrote, "They say that the body could not be washed. The water began to stink and turn black when it touched the thigh. Attempts to prepare the body for burial ended in failure. All the cloths used to wrap the deceased began to darken within an hour. The wine that the priest sprinkled on her head ran down her chest and from there onto her stomach, leaving black stains. When the junior novice removed the second sheet, she cried out, 'She's moving!' This was recorded in the Mother Superior's diary. The court council discussed the possibility of embalming. The archbishop opposed this, saying, 'The body must not be touched until it is confirmed that she died in purity.' In response, someone reminded him that she had not called for a confessor. Father Severino, who had baptized the queen, was then summoned. His notes read, "I approached the body and could not stay. I did not see the saint. I saw flesh that was shameful. This is not death. This is something else. The queen died without leaving a will." Her guardian, the Duke of Orvieto, immediately demanded that her death be declared accidental, but Bishop Valente insisted that a secret investigation be conducted to clear her memory. It lasted 2 days. The report stated, "There are traces of a brown substance under the nails of the deceased, probably blood. There is thick mucus in the uterus. This gave rise to rumors that she had been raped. Officially, this version was rejected. By the evening of the 5th day, the body began to emit steam. When new cloth was brought to cover the face, a white worm crawled out of the ear. The servant holding the candle fainted. A day later, the mattress on which the queen lay rotted in the middle. 2 cockroaches crawled out from under the bed. They were crushed on the spot. They did not begin to dissect the body until the 4th day after the onset of the illness. Until then, the servant simply changed the bedding, burned the soaked cloths, and smeared the walls with vinegar to mask the smell. The royal physician, Bernard, did not leave the room for almost 2 days, recording every new symptoms in his red, leather-bound notebook. It is from his notes that we know that the skin of the girl's lower abdomen took on the color of old meat, with a dull coating and cracks like a toad. At first, it was thought to be internal inflammation, the result of untimely blood purification. But later, when a priest was allowed into the chambers, he said, "This is not a disease, it is a curse." The disease was not officially named. In correspondence between the Queen Mother and the Archbishop of Rouen, it was referred to as a trial. Allegedly, God had subjected her body to such suffering in order to reveal her soul. But the courtiers knew that it all started with pain in her side. On the very night when the princess did not come to evening prayers, and the chaplain was forced to read the Psalms alone, the servant who brought her water said that she was clutching her side and muttering, "It's burning, inside." In the morning, she didn't get up. In the evening, she began to scream. After that, she began to discharge a cloudy fluid streaked with blood. The bedding had to be burned, the mattress replaced, and the wooden lattice boiled in honey and laurel broth. Bernard wrote, "The second night, fever. Her body is dry, but her groin area is sticky. The pain is getting worse. The groin was the source of the stench. They washed it with wine, rubbed it with vinegar, and applied bandages with honey and oil. But the skin began to peel and later darken. This caused panic. The princess was still conscious. She whispered the names of long dead women of her family, asked for water, but did not drink. Sometimes she sang. Later, this was attributed to delirium. When the archdeacon was called, he wrote, "She spoke clearly, as if she were not ill. She asked for her underwear to be burned, for the bishop not to be allowed in, and for no one to look at her wound." He did not listen. In the evening, he tried to examine the body himself, but was stopped by hysterics. A servant reported that she spat in the face of anyone who approached the bed without permission. Her hands were still strong. While the servants wiped the walls and the cook washed the dishes separately from the rest of the household, the Queen Mother summoned 4 physicians. One was an herbalist, the second a bloodletter, and the third a former alchemist who had been expelled from the university. They were not allowed into the chambers. They simply knelt in the next room and sniffed the cloth brought from the bed. One of them, François Dupuis, said, "This is not a disease, it is decay. This happens when death is already inside, but the soul is still holding on." He was later expelled for blasphemy. On the 5th day, the room was filled with flies. They were chased away with tansy, but they kept coming back. Because of this, the shutters were forbidden to be opened. The room became dark. The servants began to pray. One of them, according to rumors, hanged himself in the stable. Another disappeared. No one wanted to bring water or laundry anymore. Only one brother from the Order of the Silent Ones remained at the door. His name was Michel. He said nothing, only brought bowls and left. They were afraid of him, but he did not die. By this time, the girl's body began to emit a smell that could be smelled even in the hallway. The Queen Mother ordered the floors to be covered with straw, the doors to be covered with cloth, and a tub of charcoal and incense to be placed against the wall. When the legate from Avignon arrived, he could not enter. The letter sent to the Pope contained only one sentence: "She does not accept blessings." This was interpreted in different ways. Some believed that the princess had fallen into disgrace. Others believed that she was resisting the devil. On the 6th day, pus appeared. At first, there was only a little on the bandages, then on the linen, and then on the sheets. It was yellowish, sticky, and clotted. A blackish liquid flowed from her groin. One of the doctors compared it to onion broth cooked in meat broth. He was not called back. Panic broke out. The mourners were sent away. The cardinal tried twice to perform a purification ritual. Both times he lost consciousness. Some said it was a sign. Others said the air was tainted. There was a rustling sound in the room itself. Later, the servants claimed it was worms. One of them, named Raoul, said he saw something white crawling out from under the sheet. He was flogged for lying, but later he died of fever, and his words were taken seriously. The room began to be sprinkled with holy water every evening, but the rustling did not disappear. Sometimes the princess herself whispered something. When she opened her eyes on the 7th day, she had dark circles under her eyes and cracked lips. She did not recognize her mother. She only said, "I'm still here. Why?" Later, she lost consciousness again. On the 8th day, blood began to flow from her body, from her groin, down her legs, onto the sheets. They tried to stop it, applying cloths and powder made from ashes, but it was all in vain. One of the monks later wrote in a note, "Only those who had been executed and not yet buried looked like this." He added, "The flesh of royal blood shouldn't rot, but it is rotting." More and more people began to repeat this. In the corridors of the palace, people whispered, "God has turned away." The princess's father was away on a trip, but he received reports. Letters told him of a mysterious death, inexplicable suffering, and a miracle with the opposite effect. He delayed his return. Some said it was out of fear. Others said it was out of shame. He himself wrote, "If she dies, her death must be sacred. Otherwise, everything will collapse." This phrase later became the subject of discussion at secret councils. No one understood what otherwise meant, but it was already too late. On the 9th day, she was unrecognizable. Her eyes were sunken, her hair was falling out, her chest had caved in, blood was coming out of her nose, her tongue was swollen. When Bernard tried to call her name, she turned away, but her face wasn't calm. It resembled a mask of suffering, and the blood continued to flow. The 10th day began in silence. No one entered the chambers until noon. The servants simply left water and incense at the door. But the smell could already be smelled in the far wing. Even the windows in the chapel began to be closed. One of the young singers, named Jean, fainted as he passed by the door. He was dragged away by his hair and told to be quiet. The princess's body did not move. Only her lips, dry and cracked, moved occasionally. She no longer opened her eyes, but she was still breathing, lightly, with a wheeze, like a flame that is dying out on its own. Dr. Bernard, standing nearby, wrote, "Low temperature, weak heartbeat. The skin around the groin has completely separated from the flesh. Ulcers on the inner thigh. Discharge with streaks of pus. The stench is getting worse." His diary contained notes about a white coating around the navel and creeping spots. He did not dare to describe it directly, but made it clear that worms had appeared. At first, there were only a few, then more. They were removed with a knife. The areas were treated with salt and wormwood decoction, but each time they returned. When the archdeacon entered the room for her last confession, he did not last 15 minutes. A note was sent to the bishop. "She does not speak, she only looks. There is fear in her eyes, but no supplication. It is as if she knows she will not be forgiven." Later, he admitted that he saw not only pus, but also black spots on her chest. Some believed that her mammary glands had begun to rot, but no one confirmed this officially. The mattress on which the princess lay was no longer changed. It was simply lined with herbs. The fabrics became soaked overnight. The servants now only entered wearing masks made of hemp soaked in vinegar. One of them, an old man named Luis, said that he had never seen anything smell like that from a living person. He lived for 3 more days. He died of suffocation. At the funeral, no one mentioned where he had served. The Queen Mother decided it was time to call a priest for the funeral rites, but when the Bishop of Tours arrived, he refused to enter. "I cannot read prayers when the body has already been defiled." These words reached the father. He sent a reply, "If we do not bury her as a saint, the whole family will die." This was a political acknowledgement of disaster, because no one considered the daughter's body to be blessed anymore. By the 12th day, the skin on her stomach had turned completely black. It became thick like leather. One of the monks, after treating the sores with oil, wrote, "The flesh does not respond. It is like a corpse." When Bernard tried to lift the sheet to change her underwear, pieces of skin remained on the fabric. The doctors demanded an autopsy to remove the pockets of pus. The Queen forbade it. "She is not dead yet," she said. But she herself no longer entered the chambers. Her silence gave rise to fear. Rumors spread that the disease was contagious. Servants fled. The kitchen stopped preparing food for the royal chamber. The stairs were sprinkled with salt. Storekeepers did not touch the linen with their bare hands. Several women from the staff burned their own clothes for fear of bringing the curse home. On the 13th day, the clerk died. He was a young man who had recorded all of Bernard's statements. He was found at the gate with his fingers curled and his face blue. It was believed that he had suffocated, but later it was reported that he had drunk a decoction of fly agaric mushrooms. A page was found in his bag with the phrase, "She is dead, but we cannot say it out loud." After that, the Queen agreed to allow only one person into the room, a hermit monk, a former executioner who had been silent since he executed his own brother. He entered and remained until evening. On his way out, he said only one thing: "She is still alive, but the flesh is no longer hers." This was a turning point. A secret council was convened. The senior nobles and courtiers discussed how to hide what had happened. It was decided to attribute the illness to the plague and declare a quarantine, but the princess was not yet dead, and that was a problem. On the 14th day, the body began to make noises. When Denny's brother came to change the cloth under her back, he heard a slurping sound. He thought it was moisture, but when he touched the sheet, it moved. Something was crawling under it. He screamed, dropped the bucket of broth, and ran out. Splashes remained on the wall. They did not wipe them off. They simply covered them with a drape. Since then, no one entered alone, only in pairs, only accompanied by a page who stood at the door and prayed. Pieces of flesh were separating from the body. One of the doctors later wrote, "I touched the lower rib. It was loose. It seemed to be held together by mucus." This was confirmation that the body had begun to decompose while she was still alive. But death did not come. The princess was breathing, sometimes in gasps, sometimes evenly, but she did not die. On the 15th day, a messenger arrived from the king's court. He brought orders to prepare the body for burial. He did not know that she was still alive. When he was told, he turned pale and said, "Then let her not rise." His words were relayed to the archbishop, who for the first time acknowledged that the illness was not from God, and the body continued to leak. A dark liquid resembling tar flowed from the navel. Ulcers spread across her sides. Her breasts swelled and turned black. Servants said that something gray was oozing from her nipples. Some claimed to have seen worms on her stomach. Bernard did not record this, but he no longer ate. He just sat by the window and breathed in vinegar. The princess opened her eyes for the last time on the 16th day. She did not say a word. She just looked at the ceiling. Then her eyes closed. 2 hours later, dark blood flowed from her ears. No one dared to say, "She is dead," because she was still breathing. On the 31st day, the body no longer resembled flesh. It lay in a deep hollow of rotten straw, which was changed 6 times a day. but which always turned black and began to smoke. Something between milk and resin flowed from under her belly, with films like those in a rotten egg. Those who dared to approach did so with their faces covered and carried a copper cross, herbs, or a vessel of salt. But even they did not stay longer than a quarter of an hour. Otherwise, they began to suffocate, lose coordination, and fall into a stupor. One brother fell right into his bed. He was dragged away, and 2 days later, he died in a fever, never regaining consciousness. His last words were recorded by a scribe. "She's talking from inside. I don't want to listen. Don't make me." The princess's eyes, or what was left of them, were covered with a film. One dried up and fell out. Another swelled and cracked when a servant tried to dampen her forehead with a wet cloth. Something viscous, almost stringy, oozed from the wound in her skull. Her hair fell out in clumps. The skin on her temples cracked with every movement. Attempts to lift the body resulted in the muscles slipping away. Touching the shoulder caused a finger to sink in, as if into yeast dough. But even so, it was clear that she was still breathing, convulsive, rare, irregular, sometimes with a sob, as if her lungs were filling with fluid, sometimes with a wheeze, when spots of blood came out of her mouth along with the air. One of the guards who entered to check on the body ran out in horror, losing his mind. She's alive, and there's someone else there." On the 38th day, a secret council gathered in the palazzo. Among those present were the chancellor, 2 archbishops, and a personal confessor who had been kept away from the body for 2 weeks. The decision was unanimous: to declare her dead and begin the rites. But the question remained, how to touch a body that had decomposed but was not dead. Attempts to bring in a vessel with incense ended in failure. The smell mixed with the stench of decay, so that even an experienced doctor began to vomit. The windows were boarded up. It was dark in the chambers, even during the day. There was no pulse, no breath, but the entire lower abdomen continued to ooze. Worm-like clots flowed out from between his legs. One of the copyists recorded that thin white creatures resembling larvae appeared from the perineum and began to spread across the sheets. A day later, the walls of the room were covered with a slime resembling streaks of sour wine. On the 40th day, the body burst. It was not an autopsy. It burst from internal pressure. Something fell out of the tear in her side. It was oval-shaped, purulent, with scraps of tissue. This was recorded by 2 witnesses. Their letters were later burned. One of them wrote, "I don't know what it is. It was breathing." It was decided not to touch the body. It was covered with 9 layers of cloth, soaked in a decoction of oak bark, ash, and honey. Bags of salt were placed on top, but the liquid continued to soak through the covering. By morning, the fabric had turned black, and spots appeared on it, resembling fingerprints, but too thin, too long to be human. When the Mother Superior of the convent, where the princess was to be buried, received the news of her death, she refused to accept the body. God accepts the soul, but I do not believe she is gone. The archbishop gave orders for the ceremony to be held outside the walls of the temple. The body was carried at night in a closed coffin, sealed with 7 seals. The priest did not dare to touch it. He only read prayers from a distance. The coffin creaked. Blood oozed from the cracks. She was buried without ceremony, without singing, without candles, without words. A grave was dug in the backyard of the monastery, where lepers had previously been buried. 3 people were present. 1 fled. Another died of fever. The 3rd remained silent until the end of his days. A week later, the trees began to wither above the grave. One of the monks wrote, "Birds do not fly over this place. Cats meow and scratch at the doors. Something is trying to get out." Later, a chapel was built over the burial site, but it burned down 2 months later, allegedly from a lightning strike. Others said that the fire started from below. Only years later did chroniclers allow themselves one sentence, which remained in the records. She died, but the earth did not accept her, and her flesh did not dissolve into dust, because dust was foreign to her.